Hi everyone, welcome back to Highly Inspired. I'm Ella.
And I'm Jordan.
Hey guys, this week we are going to be doing a follow-up episode to the Great Reset. Jordan and I did our first episode on the Great Reset about a year ago, which is crazy. And that was when we kind of really discovered the agenda behind the World Economic Forum. And a lot has changed since then. I think that more truth has been revealed. Our perspectives have definitely broadened since then. And we seem to be moving closer to the 2030 agenda. But it does seem like luckily there's been a lot more resistance and a lot more kind of awakening of people in the general public than there was even last year. And it seems to be kind of spreading worldwide. But before we dive into that, Jordan and I do have some announcements, especially because, it's been a while and we're wrapping up the year and kind of just looking ahead to the new year.
It's been a couple months since we sat down and recorded an episode. We've been working on some stuff in the meantime. So we have been at work on a few projects that are podcast related. One of them being that we are excited to announce that we're going to be launching a Kickstarter campaign sometime in the next month. Stay tuned for that date. We'll be announcing it in a few weeks. But yeah, there's been a lot of components that have gone into that, including a whole trailer video and just a lot of details surrounding our brand and what we hope to accomplish in the next year in 2022. So yeah, and obviously holidays, things come about. It's been a busy time, but
some personal things came up for Jordan and her family too. So there was reasons why we got off track, but I think that this is a good time to reset, especially after the holidays and with the new year hitting, and to get back into that regular routine for you guys.
Ironic, the word reset.
I know.
Yeah, no, it's been a complete full year since we recorded that last Great Reset episode. And that was a big turning point for Highly Inspired. I remember when we recorded it because that's when we really sort of shifted gears from, say, more pop culture topics into the realm of very high level, big picture, behind the scenes smokescreen type of investigation. So yeah, I'm excited to be revisiting it and just checking up on what the big players in the game are doing. And we've been researching this for the past couple of weeks, so we found some good stuff.
Yeah, so we're gonna start with what we got right last year. We kind of went back and rewatched our video. We're gonna talk about what we got wrong because we did get some stuff wrong. And then we're also going to be talking about just kind of like updates and where we think things are going and are they accelerating, are things slowing down? But just kind of like starting to reflecting on what we originally talked about in our last episode and things that really stuck up to me when I was rewatching it. I think that we did accurately talk about kind of moving from this period of crisis to normalization. Do you remember when we talked about that?
Yep. Yeah. The stages of normalization with destabilization and those four stages. I don't know if you know this off the top of your head, but
yeah, the ideological subversion stages was, I mean, that concept has definitely become very like widespread this year on Twitter. I will say when we first talked about it, it was a little bit, I don't think people were as aware of it, but I think that for me, I was the most surprised like how fast we went from crisis to normalization. I thought that process would be a little bit slower, but I don't know.
Well, we're adaptable. I mean, yeah, it's been 2 years, but I feel like we've been at a static place of normalization for the entirety of 2021. Having the normalization of masks at the airports and still not rehumanizing one another and sort of looking at each other as petri dishes with COVID and all of that. Like we have not returned back to how we were before in that category.
Yeah. So I'm just going to play a short little clip.
Okay. From our previous episode?
Yeah.
Okay.
That kind of goes along with this. It's only like a few minutes or a few seconds or something.
Reaches crisis point. So do you think that we've hit normalization with COVID at this point?
I think that we're in the beginning stages of it. I think that just going based off of what these key actors have said, I mean, the World Economic Forum, which is one of the third main parties involved in this, they pretty much have straight up said their goal is by 2030 at the latest. And the guy who broke down the 4 stages of ideological subversion, he said that normalization can take as short as like a year to 2 years. So I don't really know. I think that we're kind of moving from crisis to normalization. Yeah.
I mean, we're definitely not in panic mode like we were earlier this year, but I do think that from what I've seen with people, we're definitely adjusted to this new reality that we have, everything being more online, not really socializing as much, things we used to do. Yeah. We don't have that anymore. And actually what I do personally, and I'm not afraid to admit this, whenever I see that, I actually tell people all the time, like, don't forget what we had before. Like, I don't. Okay, well, as painful as it is to listen to myself speak, there were a few tidbits in there that both you and I said that I do still agree with. One being the last quote that I actually said, which was, don't forget what we had before in regards to freedom. I think that that's what I was alluding to. And if I were to repeat that quote now, I would say, yeah, I would allude to freedom as well. Like, don't forget the freedoms that we had before. Don't forget the way that we used to humanize one another before, and have maybe more control over our lifestyle, our assets, ownership, how we conduct ourselves in society. That's what I would correlate that quote to now. But yeah, what do you think?
I think it's crazy how much, even with that like awareness, like for myself, like, oh, don't forget what we have, like how much I've even normalized myself into this new situation, and things that I've definitely conceded a lot of territory this past year. I think that even last year I still thought like, oh, like I could go back to Europe potentially, like I could go to New York. I mean, even LA has recently fallen. A bunch of cities recently just announced a lot of mandates and stuff. So I think that I was not too naive, but a tad naive to how like fast things could spiral. And I think that also
we weren't naive to thinking that the measures being taken were going to be taken at some point, but we were naive to the fact of that it happened so fast.
And I think that I was imagining that like the lockdown would stay fully locked down in those places, and that they would like just completely stay shut down. I know that we did eventually talk about the vaccine mandates. Like I did know that that was coming, but I didn't think that things would feel as like slow as they did. Like, like it was a very, especially living in California, like the people that I know now living there, that it's still open to people that are willing to comply. Like they haven't felt that discomfort yet. To them, they're actually more comfortable. And I feel like the reverse has happened to me, where I actually would prefer things. Like I was actually more comfortable when everything was just locked down for everyone, versus now it's like fully segregated. Like to me, that's almost
I completely agree.
Like a worse stage, even though like
because we're not all on the same plane.
Yeah.
Some states, people are living a totally different reality with different, access to conveniences and different things that they're able to involve themselves in. But in other states, yeah, maybe if we don't have the same measures and COVID protocols under us, that yeah, it's you're right, we're on different planes.
Yeah. And I think that something else that we talked about, which I think we were right about, was that they were going to shift from COVID to the stuff with climate change. And I want to get into this more later, but I do think that right now we are kind of seeing a defeat with Biden kind of throwing up his hands, with the CDC lowering.
As of like 2 days ago, by the way.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, he literally, for those of you who haven't been paying attention or aren't aware yet, he said in a press briefing, he said there's not a federal solution to COVID and that it should be
handled at the state level.
Yeah, which, I mean, he hasn't taken back his mandate yet, but it seems like he isn't pushing further. And I don't know what this means. I have a lot of theories. I don't think that we should celebrate too early on. I think that there's there's got to be something else brewing.
There
I don't know.
most always is. We just don't know what that is yet. We don't know what the true colors are as to why all of a sudden all media outlets and big corporations and, the federal government are now saying, wait a minute, this is the norm. This is what we just have to deal with, and the states can handle it on their own. I don't know why they have made such a drastic transition like that. And they've said these announcements in Biden's statement very casually, I think to insinuate that this wasn't a surprise or to not catch people off guard so that it kind of slips through the cracks under, with our radar. But it actually is a huge transition, and I want to emphasize that because I don't think people are really picking up on that.
Well, I have a few different theories. I think that number one, this is like a real, like, spiritual, physical war, that information war that we're going through right now, in terms of like the people and the resistance and the people that are the globalists and the CCP and our puppet politicians who don't even really have any power, but they're all just corrupted and doing what whoever the puppeteer is telling them to do. And I think that there's been, some sort of spiritual battle kind of being won right now, where I think because, that huge Joe Rogan episode that launched with Dr. Peter McCullough, and them walking through like all the truth behind like the treatments that are being hidden from people, the truth behind the vaccine efficiencies, all this stuff. And I think that there's been enough pushback on the mandates that they have to do something to kind of reel it back. But what I think that they're actually doing is that they're still holding on to the cities that they have control over, and they're pushing in a federalized police force, because you're seeing in places like San Francisco and places like New York, even Chicago, you're having all the mayors of these cities, specifically with San Francisco, you have the mayor all of a sudden out of nowhere. It went from defund the police to we need to have the police. We need to not even have the police reinstated, but we need to take on additional emergency powers. And we're going to go into places like the Tenderloin and all these like neighborhoods, and we're now going to have the authority to take people off the streets against their will, for the broad reasonings of health and safety. And what does that mean? Like, where is that like power going to get extended to? Who are these policemen? Are they localized? Are they federalized? Somewhere in the middle? Who are they taking orders from? Are they following laws? Are people being read their rights? Like, where are these people going? Like, I have so many questions. And
it'll be a snowball effect too, because once the power is established and they have these routines and new training measures put in place for growing their forces, then it'll be harder and harder to shut that down with like a legal, with legal tactics.
Yeah, and this is also something that I think we maybe got wrong or missed last year. Was I think that, when we recorded a year ago, we were, I think, still looking at this from a very more political lens. I think that we saw things through the lens of the election. The election had just happened.
Yeah, right versus left.
Yeah, and we had just dealt with the riots from that summer, which were something that we hadn't seen before. And there was a lot of talk of like law and order, back the blue. And I think that actually, and this comment might offend people on the right, but I think that a lot of conservatives have gotten very comfortable saying those blanket statements. But I mean, when you see a video of a police officer in New York escorting a child out and threatening to arrest a child because a 5-year-old doesn't have a vaccine passport to show to eat at a restaurant, that saying back the blue isn't working in that scenario. And I think that in conjunction with what's happening in San Francisco, where you're now giving the police extended power to remove people for health and safety measures, and you're not defining what that is. People who are wealthy who don't like crime might be like, oh yay, like my city's getting cleaned up, like LA's getting cleaned up, New York's getting cleaned up, like
Yippee.
no more murders, no more, like, which is great. Like, but should we have that at the cost of your rights getting taken away? And what happens when you eventually fit into that health and safety category? Like, what happens when that doesn't just mean the homeless or the criminals? Like, what
when
like
you're also red flagged too,
Yeah.
and they come after you for something that maybe isn't even traditionally looked at as criminal or traditionally looked at by the law. Like, we're going through new times with new issues that we're trying to decipher what is the ethical backing of it. So yeah, you're right.
And what did we learn with our Australia guest? I mean, she basically told us that the reason why they're in the predicament that they're in now is because the police have been given full autonomy to interpret the law however they deem correct. And they're basically the ones
Terrifying.
making the calls when it's like, wait a second, police, they're not lawyers, they're not judges, they're not the legal system.
Yeah, what are their qualifications in order to be granted that much power to be interpreting the law?
Yeah, and it's just unfortunate because I actually have learned a lot this year, and I didn't understand a lot of the issues that had to do with policing. I think that honestly, like from my position and kind of like the blessings that I've had, I've always thought of the police as this like comfort and this like force to be helpful in a dangerous situation. But I mean, now you're not getting that benefit. And I'm also seeing it from other people's perspective when they've always viewed, in certain communities, viewed the police as kind of a source of tension, whether or not that is statistically justifiable or not. I think that I'm able to, after this year, empathize a lot more, because in certain places, like I am kind of scared of the police now, you know, because you see these videos in other places and it's just not like appropriate. It's brutal force that isn't necessary, you know?
Yeah, obviously the police and what they're doing, it varies from state to state currently at the moment. I would love to highlight a bit of a police encounter story that I had a few weeks ago. Ella, you know this already, but basically I was home alone because my family was out of town, and this was like one of the weekends leading up to Christmas, which I'm not sure if, you know, the police were short staffed because of the holidays or people going on breaks or something like that. But in the middle of the night, really, really late, it was a storm night, like it was pouring down rain. I had the alarm go off in the middle of the night and I was home alone. Normally that does not happen. Like, our alarm is not that sensitive. So my alarm company called and they connected me with a police department. I wasn't given the option to decide which police department it was, but it was just one in my area. And I told them, like, I definitely didn't belittle what was going on. I said, I think someone's in the house. Our alarm, like, something is off. I don't know what it is. You might as well send, you know, a police team out here. So they did. And basically, in short, they didn't show up for an hour and a half. And an hour and a half, if someone was really in your house, which thankfully that is not what happened. We had some sort of glitch, but an hour and a half is way too much time to even be flirting with the possibility of someone being in your house that is threatening to either rob from you, hurt you, or whatever else under the sun. So an hour and a half is not going to save a life. It's not going to save your life, and you would be in a very bad situation. So what I learned from that whole encounter was just, yeah, we do not have the same police availability that we used to, and it's scary because we can't rely on them to be there in 5 minutes. We can't rely on them to, fight all of our battles for us. It's not like that, and even the police that are out there, some of them are doing stuff like this, like, arresting a 5-year-old boy for not having a vaccine card.
Yeah.
So I don't know what is going on, but that was just my firsthand experience. And I am sure someone out there who's listening probably has had something similar where they wanted, the police to show up quickly, but they weren't able to for whatever reason. And that might not be good.
Yeah, and it makes people feel like, okay, well then I got to take stuff into my own hands, and what that's going to lead to is more people acquiring guns, more people who might not be trained defending themselves. And I think that honestly, something that is really interesting is I think that I always was like, oh, like what's the point of, I didn't really grow up around like guns. It's not like my family hunted. I've never even shot a gun, but I think that this year that's definitely something that I've thought about a lot more, and I've really like understood the Second Amendment more so, because if you can't rely on like a government entity to protect you, then you really are on your own, and you better have something to protect you. And that thing, it might not even be the end threat, might not even be your neighbor. It might breaking into your house. That could be a factor. But what's even scarier is like, okay, do you have to protect yourself from the actual brutal force of the actual police or the actual state or the actual government or whatever entity's in charge? And unfortunately, in places like Australia, Austria, Germany, where they're fully in a police state, they don't have that option, and even that kind of at least awareness that the police have that like, oh, there's people out there that are armed. Like, I better be more on my guard. And I think that that is actually like a healthy tension that exists here that I didn't realize, I didn't understand why that was maybe important, because I always thought, oh, the police are like on our side, but maybe that might not be the case. And I'm not saying that there aren't good policemen out there, because there's been a lot of police that in New York that stepped down, that have been fired because of their stances. But there are a lot of people that just will follow orders too. And this has been proven with multiple experiments throughout, the last 50 years. So I don't know.
There's a spectrum. It's interesting with just weapons, how the nature of weapons, like say guns, for example, are freeing to people who want to own them for protection, but they also are a mechanism to, contain order if needed to, like say contain criminals or threaten someone who's in pursuit of doing a crime. It's really interesting how that dichotomy is. And obviously there's a spectrum of how they're used ethically and how they're used unethically. I'm for the ethical side, but I am certainly not for, not having any at all. And I am very pro Second Amendment. I totally agree with you. I've totally had a much more profound reawakening to it and understanding just the entire reason why that's there this year. So I didn't anticipate doing that, but that's just what happened.
Yeah, it's really not about like, oh, your right to be able to like hunt whenever you want, or even like your right. Yeah, it's your right to protect your house from invaders and stuff. But literally, like the main reason is like your right to protect yourself from like the government, even. Because if you think about the Revolutionary War, it was a war against their current government. Like that was the whole purpose of it. And after that, like we made a social contract with the Constitution, and if your rights aren't being respected, like there's definitely room in there for that to be defended. So, we go and fight foreign wars allegedly for American values, but then we don't even uphold the Constitution here, and we aren't expected to be even a little bit upset about it. Now, I'm not saying like take up your gun, but I'm just saying like people aren't even talking about like protests or that sort of thing. I think that another thing that we might have missed or gone wrong on the Great Reset episode was that we kind of focused too much on socialism, especially just kind of like the economics of it, and comparing like different countries and different approaches. And I don't think that we really dissected Europe enough. I think that I specifically miscategorized Denmark and kind of threw it more with a capitalist route, which I think is still somewhat accurate. But I do think that if you study history, and this is something that I watched a documentary on, and I'm starting to realize that a lot of the conflicts that we have, it's usually people really high up, a lot of times like banking in the UK, which is just totally crazy, but like are funding both sides of wars. This happened in World War I, this happened in World War II. And in World War II, actually, the people that were in charge of Germany and the people that were in charge of the UK, England, they actually wanted the same thing. They wanted a centralized, controlled, governing force, but they had two different ways to achieve that. Italy wanted to do fascism, which means you control something very fast by brutal force. And the UK wanted to do a very slow socialism, democratic socialism approach where we would
Dependence.
slowly get people dependent on the government, and it'd be the long game versus the short game. And then the two ended up clashing and having a war. And we thought, oh my gosh, democracy won, blah, blah. And maybe it did surface level, etc. I mean, you did have Western Europe, but now it's actually Eastern Europe that is being the most resilient and kind of resistant of all this COVID stuff, because they've actually experienced real communism, and they've learned. They were under the USSR, and in Europe, in Eastern Europe, I mean, think about it. How many people in the UK own houses, do you think, compared to Americans?
Not even a fraction.
Yeah.
Not a fraction. I don't know how to guess like a probability, but I would assume not a fraction.
Yeah. I'm actually going to look it up because I'm curious. Okay. So it says about 63%. Now I'm going to look in the US. I'm just curious. Okay. So in the US, it's 79 million own homes, and then only 14 million in the UK, but you have to adjust that for population. So I'm not sure what I'd have to adjust that for population, but it's definitely, I would guess, a smaller portion of people. And I think that, you know, or at least just even like culturally, it's not as big of a thing in their culture. And I think that that's because slowly, like, people they have caps on like how much money they can make. They'd rather trade in having, you know, a few months of vacation time versus a few weeks. They'd rather have the 4-day work week, stuff like that. I mean, in France, it's like illegal to work, more than like 35 hours a week. So I think that, you know, like, for so long we've had this like American dream. Okay, the way to like build equity is you buy your own house and you pay off your mortgage, and at the end you can use that as like a retirement fund and sell your home, and it's appreciated and all this stuff, and there's all this land. And in Europe, I don't think that same mentality exists, and I think it's because certain policies have slowly made Western Europe kind of more dependent on certain rules and stuff. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I want to take it back to when you mentioned that you thought that our episode last year focused on this push for more socialism, or I guess under the alias of stakeholder capitalism or shareholder capitalism. That's what they had been saying. Like, World Economic Forum is
stakeholder capitalism. Not shareholder capitalism.
Stakeholder capitalism.
Yeah, just don't
okay.
confuse
But that basically is a code for socialism.
Yes.
Okay. So I think that, we did talk about that a lot, and we thought that was going to be the push. But actually, I think what the push is, like, so then the intrinsic nature of socialism would be, say, the government giving you stuff, like pseudo ownership of things. But I think with this Great Reset plan, we're leading more towards where they're not even going to be giving us anything. It's just going to be us renting from all of these big corporations. Mm-hmm. So what even is that? Could we qualify that as socialism? Like, they're not giving us assets. They're not giving us money that's our own. It's just a cycle of us renting basically everything that we want to be indulging in.
Modern serfdom.
Yeah. I guess, like in Russia.
Yeah, or even just medieval Europe. Think about medieval Europe, where you didn't own the land that you lived on, but if you were lucky, you could live on the land that you farmed the crops for. You know, your income was really kind of like being able to be like you weren't a slave really, because you weren't a slave, but you were kind of in indentured servitism sort of situation where you're kind of, yeah, you're living and you're getting food and all that, but it's like a class system. It's you don't have any real equity in anything, and therefore you don't have any like autonomy. I think that something that I didn't realize, which I totally fell into a trap about this, but the reason why like YouTube, Instagram like promotes things like, oh, living in your van.
I thought about this today.
The reason why they promote that stuff with their algorithms, it's not just like to encourage you to be a minimalist and like enjoy nature. It's literally strategic because they want you to not have a lot of things, which, I mean, if you think about that in a biblical sense, like that is great. Like we should all be wanting to not have as many things. We should be wanting to give to the poor. We should be wanting to not live, excessive lifestyles. But I don't think that.
But not having the freedom to do it is suppressive, and that's where we will create chaos in society. And this is just human nature. Like we want the freedom to be able to do things, to own things, to make decisions without someone else having to make them for us. So yes, in theory, we should be wanting to live more impoverished lifestyles. And honestly, that's probably what most people are fine with doing and want to do as is. But when it's forced upon you, that's where chaos can still, sneak out and grow into more.
Well, it's not even that. It's also, okay, so if that happens, you don't think that there's still going to be greedy people at the top that then will just take over everything, and then you still won't have autonomy? Like, okay, if BlackRock literally takes up all of the land in the US, you think you're going to be able to just take your camper freely across state line to state line and be able to park it wherever? Like, no, you aren't going to be able to do that. So I think that, yeah, in theory, that is a great mindset to have. And I think that we should be always striving to do more with less. But it's like, okay, also God and Jesus, he wanted us to use the resources that he gave us, not in excess, but to nourish us, to use the farmland to grow crops, to feed us and all this stuff. And you think that you're not going to have any land to be able to do that. Like you're going to have to get your COVID pill every morning from the pharmaceutical companies and get your package delivered meal from the whatever version of Postmates gets shipped off into your little tube. And it's not going to be nourished, wholesome food. So I think that we think like, oh, we'll be minimalistic, but eventually someone's going to come in and grab all of that, like all those resources, and then it's not going to get distributed properly,
By the way, are we playing that clip?
Which clip?
The shareholder versus stakeholder capitalism.
We can if you want.
Yeah, let's play. Just kind of while we're still on that topic.
What is the time? 9:20?
9:30.
Oh, okay.
On Earth has suffered from this. However, I don't know if it's as simple as that. And what they're doing is they're disguising socialism as stakeholder capitalism.
Yeah.
And Ella and I, for a while, I think we've both come across it. We just had no idea what it was because we thought, oh, capitalism is in the phrase. That might mean the same thing. It might be just another friend of shareholder capitalism or something like that. But it's definitely not.
No. So I first came across stakeholder capitalism in a course that I took in the UK when I was studying there earlier this year. And I was very kind of intrigued with this idea. I had a really great, sweet professor, and he basically was like, explaining all of the corruption that goes on behind Amazon and how they don't treat their employees right and how they don't pay taxes and all the things that we're very much aware of as the holes within capitalism, and how basically the solution to that should not be that these companies should continue to have an obligation to their shareholders, which shareholder capitalism is the capitalism that all Western countries and even in Asia that practice capitalism are founded on, which is basically the main purpose of the corporation is maximizing shareholder value, which is like profit driven essentially. And kind of everything else will kind of come as you're doing that. Like if your shareholders care about the environment, if they care about human rights, and they're not going to invest in your company anymore. And you've kind of seen that play out because capitalism, a lot of people don't know this, but I think that was kind of the majority of it. But something that I think we did a good job explaining the difference between the two. However, I think something that we missed there was that, yes, corporations are making this shift, but let's also examine what they were doing before they even made this shift. Like, were they really, and obviously we're grouping a lot of corporations together as we're saying this, and you'd have to go corporation by corporation. But I think that you could look at a lot of corporations and be like, okay, even before this new term, stakeholder capitalism, which is kind of breeding the grounds for a social credit score, both from a corporation but also an individual standpoint. However, I think that even before this term and before this new scoring, I don't think that corporations have had people's like best interests at heart. And I think that that's something that on the right gets overlooked a lot, or has up until this whole big pharma explosion has happened. I think that on the left, people traditionally have been a lot more skeptical of, okay, what is Coca-Cola actually promoting? Should there be regulations on what they're producing? And like, should there be limits on how much corporations can profit off of people? You know,
you're right. That's a good point. Actually, traditionally, the left had been more skeptical of corrupt capitalism and, you know, big corporations taking advantage in maybe some unethical ways. But it wasn't only until big pharma and with this whole vaccine situation that the people on the right maybe have now woken up more towards the corrupt capitalism that they're involving themselves with, which is really interesting. Yeah, I really like that take.
Yeah, I mean, I think that now it's like, oh my gosh, wait, Pfizer now has just announced that in their final, I think their fourth quarter annual report or quarterly report, wrapping up for the annual report, and they're saying all of our next quarterly revenue income streams is going to be mainly with COVID related stuff. Like you can't recover from that. You can't do a pivot. Like if that's where all your income's going to come from, like they're not going to just give that up. And then once you realize, oh, that industry is doing that, then you can apply it to all these other different industries. And I think that's something also that the libertarian right especially missed was earlier on. We should have censored the tech companies more, we should have regulated them more and made them utilities, because now we have Twitter, which used to kind of be at least a little bit more free, but with Jack Dorsey stepping down, it's gotten even more tight with how many people it's cleansing its accounts from. I mean, my favorite account, Nancy Pelosi's portfolio tracker, has been deleted.
It was such a good account.
That was a really good account.
I'm really sad. When you told me that, I really was sad.
Yeah.
And hopefully it could come back on another platform maybe sometime soon. But you're right. Yeah. Once they're kind of off the platform, they're gone. Like, have we ever seen any big account that was deplatformed then somehow come back? Like, that has not happened. No, so it's not a good sign to see that. And it's occurring a lot more frequently, which is even worse.
Yeah. And so I don't know. I think that
I have a article that I found, and this was actually published by Forbes in 2016.
Okay.
And here's a quote that sort of talks about the 2030 agenda that they published all the way back then. This is from the World Economic Forum. And so when we first came across like the Great Reset concept, and we spoke on this in the previous episode from last year a lot, we came across the Great Reset term pretty much right around when we recorded that. So it was very new, very fresh off, you know.
I cried a day before we recorded because I was so overwhelmed with
yes,
everything
it was
we were reading.
A wave of very scary epiphanies, but I'm really glad that we had this outlet to sort of like uncover it and help ourselves process it. I know, I didn't either. Not at the level of what it actually is. I mean, I had come across the word before, but So yeah, in short, the 2030 agenda is very closely tied to the Great Reset plan. It's sort of just like another way of wording it. And on the World Economic Forum's website, you can go and look up the 2030 agenda. You can go look up the Great Reset, and they have published two completely separate like areas of all of this plethora of information on both of them. So at this time last year, they didn't have that. They maybe had published a few articles on it, but it was not at the level of giving us these encyclopedias of what exactly they're encouraging and putting out into the world for us. So I guess we could say the amount of content surrounding both of these concepts has basically like quadrupled just in 1 year. And also paired with Klaus Schwab's book, COVID-19, The Great Reset. He's literally published a book. He's the founder and CEO of the World Economic Forum. But so here's what this article is. And this is published in 2016, by the way, almost 6 years ago.
Yeah.
Welcome to 2030. I own nothing, have no privacy, and life has never been better.
Oh, yeah.
Welcome to the year 2030. Welcome to my city. And this would be in a first person point of view. Or should I say, our city? I don't own anything. I don't own a car. I don't own a house. I don't own any appliances or any clothes. It might seem odd to you, but it makes perfect sense for us in this city. Everything you once considered a product has now become a service. We have access to transportation, accommodation, food, and all things we need in our daily lives. One by one, all of these things became free. So it ended up not making any sense for us to own much. So in this perfect city, the powers at play, the companies that are running the perfect city, are making things seem so much easier and so much more convenient to just be renting their services from them, that then we don't feel encouraged or incentivized to just work harder to own all of the stuff on our own. So that's just so interesting. And I think that this realization now of that we're not heading towards socialism where they're going to be giving us things for then us to be pseudo owning. It's actually just going to be us renting everything.
It's transitioning from us paying to own something to renting everything, which I think before we're like, oh, the government's just going to tax everyone and redistribute it.
Yes,
yeah,
exactly.
I think that's really good. And I think that that's a really good realization. And this is kind of a rhetorical question, but I think it's important for people to dwell on. What is the biggest disadvantage between owning something and renting something?
You're asking me that?
Yeah.
Well, I would just say that you don't have control over it.
It can be taken away from you at any point.
Yeah.
Whoever's controlling the distribution of that being rented, and if corporations are becoming more powerful than the government, at least some of them are, and especially the tech companies, which is where your social credit score is going to pop in, then it's going to be like, okay, for you to rent your house, for you to rent your car, for you to rent your phone, you got to pass this certain social credit score, like how you have a regular credit score to afford a mortgage. But nothing will ever be paid off. Nothing will ever be, people understand how land rights, like literally being able to own your own real estate, is one of the most important evolutions of freedom that has ever happened in history. It's
or just of like the entire animal kingdom. Like that's just what living things do. We want to establish a territory that's ours where we control the behaviors and activities that can go on there, like assets that we bring to it, or what we do with the land, how we can turn it into more by growing food, using it for agriculture. Like having the ability and freedom to do that is huge. And then actually having it is even better.
Yeah.
So, but now we're on the risk of losing both of those. We're not only on the risk of losing the ability to have it, but yeah, then the other one too, which is you can't do anything with it. And it's not under your discretion. It's under whoever theirs is who owns the land.
Yeah. And it's like, there are a lot of states that are still, there's a lot of open land. There's a lot of opportunity to like homestead and stuff. But if you do still want to live in a city or a suburbia environment, there's like 3 states left to do that in: Arizona, Texas, and Florida at this point. There's other states, but those are like the top 3 of 2020 and 2021 where people are migrating to. and it's driving up the prices. So you have that coupled, you have asset inflation coupled with goods and services inflation, and it's just becoming a recipe for disaster where the younger generation literally is getting priced out of places that they grew up in. And not that that hasn't happened before, because we have seen that happen, and that is been a natural occurring thing that has happened in cities and stuff. But I think that with less options, with there being less cities to even choose from, it's happening at like a very accelerated rate.
You're right.
And I think that Florida, Texas, and Arizona were considered places where you kind of like go and settle, and it's more of a buyer's market, where I think cities like, Los Angeles, Chicago, New York, maybe LA a little bit less, but they're definitely more renter cities. And so I think that it's frustrating to see a city like Phoenix, where we're from, that used to be a homeowner city, turn into like a renting economy. And you have to be pretty wealthy to even like purchase a home here. And
oh my gosh, on our neighborhood street, which we never had before, we've got way more Airbnbs now, 2 of which are always having parties. I don't know what this landlord is doing, but the other night there was this Ferrari party where, I mean, my mom's like out getting the mail, and we're watching basically strippers walk in, exiting these Hummer limos, wearing like thong Playboy bunny costumes. And it's like, what? This is a residential area. Why is that happening? Well, it's because the Airbnb and this renter economy is just exploding. And people who want to make money renting their places, they're fine with doing that. They don't care who's renting it. So people who live in suburban areas and want to maybe raise a family should be aware of that. If there are, Airbnbs and places in homes like that are constantly being rented out, that you're going to have run-ins with people that maybe you wouldn't anticipate, coming in there, which is kind of not ideal for some people, I would assume.
Yeah, I don't know.
That's a first world problem, obviously, but for people who have families or who don't want to be around that type of stuff, that behavior doesn't align with your values, that's not good. I mean, it's not, you don't have control over it. That's the problem.
Yeah. I think something else too that is interesting in terms of like the economy is a term that I didn't know about when we recorded last year. It's called a natural asset corporation. And this is something that I learned about through Whitney Webb, who, if you guys don't know, she's a really good investigative journalist. She's been on Tim Dillon a lot. I recommend listening to her. She does, and just reading her articles. She's really good. But basically, like, what these are basically, it's Wall Street is monetizing nature. That's basically what it is. Have you heard of these before? Yeah, like it's crazy. Like there's going to be natural assets that are acquired and kind of corporized, and there's going to be like owners of it, a board of directors. It's going to go through like a normal IPO process.
Yep.
And what they're going to kind of market it as is a green plan. But it's really what it's doing is transforming the financial system that we have to not only include man-made assets, but actual like things that we find in nature.
When I first came across that, what hit my mind first was, we were talking about the drone situation, where if you, worst case scenario, all of the U.S. became a police state, and you still wanted to be able to escape and say run off into the forest or something, that potentially we wouldn't even be able to do that, because with all of our facial recognition technology and search engine technology and AI, even if you have photos online, there will be technology soon, if they don't already have it, that can scan just 2D images and create a facial ID map, so that even if you haven't done facial recognition on like your iPhone or your device, they will be able to have that
photos.
data stored to plug into drones. If you were, say, running off into the forest to try to hide from a war, a police state, you might not even be able to do that as efficiently as you may want to, because then they can send drones out to then maybe execute. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's just scary. So what I'm thinking is with that natural asset corporation stuff is maybe they're gonna implement more tech, more cell towers in nature, more.
So you can't really have off the grid areas.
Exactly. So we're not gonna have any off the grid areas.
Yeah, and I think it's also just a way to control natural assets to fit that also into the utilities method, all in the name of things being green. Like, oh, you guys can't handle, you cut down too many trees to build your houses, so we're gonna make you sustainable pods, yay, that we make and we control, and we're gonna hold all the assets.
And you're not gonna have a house, you're gonna have a pod.
Yeah. And no, I think I want to read the definition of this just because I think it's important, and I actually think Bill Gates will probably be the first one to have one of these, considering he owns the majority of farmland in the US. But so the definition from this is like a financial website. It says a new class of publicly tradable securities that hold rights to and manage the productivity and ecological benefits of natural assets such as forests, marine areas, and farmland. So
which is basically everywhere.
Everything.
Yeah.
What do they not? I guess the mountains,
marine areas, the entire ocean that takes up 70% of the world. Are you kidding me? That's terrifying. Which actually, from what I can gather, I believe it's the reefs that actually are helping our ozone more than anything. It's the oxygen that's released by kelp and coral in the reefs that add to our ozone being as clean as possible, more than we would think. Or we always envision trees and that type of thing, but yeah, no, the reefs do a ton.
Are you gonna trust the people that take private jets everywhere to manage the future of the earth and how green it will be? No, like, come on, guys. Like, this is huge. And I think that especially my friends who do consider themselves to be environmentalists, that do seem to go out in nature even more than I do, enjoy things like surfing and skiing on a regular basis. I really challenge those types of people to really look into this and really understand, okay, like I guess, yes, we need to take care of the earth. Yes, we need to take care of our oceans, but what is the best way to do that? And actually, this is something that I learned in my economics class, and I've said it on the podcast, but I will say it again. Owning land is honestly the best way to do that, because the reason why the oceans are harder to manage and keep clean and keep sustainable isn't just because it's underground and we don't know what's where, but it's because you cannot privatize fishing, okay? Because that industry, like, people, think about it, people just go over different areas. Their goal is to get as many fish as possible. They're not thinking about, oh, we need to let this new generation of fish reproduce. We need to let the oysters chill out for a little bit. I mean, you have parts of Massachusetts where entire oyster beds are just completely destroyed. But with farming, I mean, granted, you have exceptions with like factory farming and stuff like that. But if you look at a true organic natural farm, especially like a small local farm, I mean, the farmers care about that land. They care about the next generation of crops.
Well, they have to care about their land, because
then they don't make money.
The land is vital to how their animals are able to stay nourished and survive and be happy, and then are ready to be harvested in the way that the farmer wants them to. So the land, it starts with the land.
Yeah. So
it ends with the land.
So you think if we just then gave up all of the natural assets to really large entities that are poisoning humans with Coca-Cola and pharmaceuticals, you think that they're gonna like solve the earth? Like, I just don't. We've seen how the government, we've seen how corporations, big pharma, big food industries, we've seen how they've handled COVID, and they haven't done a good job. And it's honestly, it's a crisis that at some point couldn't even be really fully controlled because it's a disease, it's airborne. So for us to even to think that us humans can control it is idiotic on face value.
Hard for us to wrap our heads around, though, since we're such control freaks and feel like we can make everything and anything happen. But yeah, no, we can't. It's there, and we can't really even see the error, honestly.
So yeah, it's like we're exporting our freedom to an entity that's promising to fix something that ultimately can't be controlled. And even if it could, they can't do a good job of fixing it anyways. And the same thing goes with the climate change stuff. Yes, it is a real problem, but a lot of this stuff, yes, part of it is there's a human element, but part of it is just the earth shifting and changing temperatures. And we think that we're the center of everything and that we can control stuff, but ultimately we can't. And I actually believe in the collective of the individual all doing the right thing and all being good stewards of the earth, as opposed to giving it to Bill Gates to manage the American
completely
farmland.
Completely agreed. And I'm so overseeing these weekly European conferences with thousands, hundreds and thousands of people showing up to them to gather for climate change awareness and to publish all of this content, these videos and these live streams of discussing climate change and all that we need to do to help, improve the movement. But the irony behind it is that all of those hundreds and thousands of people that showed up to these conferences are flying from all these different countries and using an insane amount of energy just to even get there.
Yeah.
And we forget that. I think we forget all of the interworks that go into all of the propaganda, the movements behind it, the campaigns, the advertising. And another thing that's also ironic is, say, companies like BlackRock and these natural asset corporations, how ironic is it that they're going to advertise to us that the reason why they're wanting to do this and wanting to form these companies is because of climate change. And what they'll end up doing is just using more energy to then make what they want to make for it.
Yeah.
Which then, in theory, it subtracts from, climate change improvement.
Yeah. I mean, the people that would rather take a private jet than go on a big plane with everyone else, you do not trust them.
That's
with
a decision
change.
that they made.
Yeah.
They didn't have to make that. They could fly commercial. That could be the most group, collective, say not glamorous way of traveling, but it's there. It's available. That's not been ruined quite yet.
Yeah.
So, yeah, they're making the choice to be prima donnas and spend extra thousands of dollars on flying privately for what? Some, slightly improved experience for 8 hours.
Speaking of
It's
flights,
ridiculous.
I do want to get into some of the COVID stuff, and I do want to play a clip that we talked about when we alluded to the vaccine mandates. Okay. And I think that what made me think to kind of make this transition is we were just talking about flights and stuff, and I think I saw that United actually has taken a lot of their planes and they've reconverted them to have way more like first class seats. Christ. Which is very suspicious to me because it makes me feel like, like there might be another mandate that comes in where you have to show vaccine stuff to travel domestically. And then the only way that they're going to make that money back is to like jack up the prices, like how flying used to be in the 60s where you had less people on a flight, but it was way more expensive to fly. And it kind of attracted more of the elite people to be able to fly. So I hope that that's not the case, but that was kind of a red flag that I saw recently. I don't know if you saw that, but
I did. Yep.
Okay. Let me find this clip. I think this is it right here.
Going back to segregation, guys. We're doing great.
With our biology even more. Well, that's what the fourth industrial revolution is. It's a blurring of the boundaries between the physical, digital, and biological world. So to me, the war on reality that has been tossed around this entire year leading up to the election, this could make it so much worse.
Yeah.
And so I just want people to remain skeptical of, okay, we have beauties that technology has given us. There's beauty in the physical world around us when we really are in tune with our reality. And there's beauty within our own biology and health and having control of what we put into our bodies and what we do with our bodies. I'm not trying to scare people, but there is word, I read a lot of articles about this, on how if this starts, what they would do is merge with the World Health Organization. And obviously they're connected to the vaccine and all these countries getting the vaccine, but they would not only require everybody to get the vaccine, but you would have to show documentation even to get on an airline that you've gotten the vaccine.
No, when my family was in Hawaii, like I didn't go, but some of my family members went, and every restaurant they went to, every place they went to, they had to like show their papers that they tested negative for COVID.
Yeah.
Like literally every place they went. So clearly the next step is the vaccine. And what's interesting about this vaccine, I don't want to go on a tangent, but what's interesting about this vaccine is that it, first of all, it uses RNA to be created. So actually my professor was explaining to me to this, and he was saying that he wants to wait a while to take the vaccine and see how it plays out, because it's the first vaccine we've ever had RNA, which reacts directly to people's genetic codes, and some people's genetic codes might not work well with this vaccine. And so I think that even something as simple as this, even though we're in a pandemic, the death rate is not higher than 99%. So it's like, why are we requiring a vaccine? There's diseases out there, measles, et cetera, that are way more deadly to younger generations that the vaccine isn't even required for those. So like, why is this one so much worse? Like, I understand we've seen so many deaths so fast, but there's other vaccines out there that those aren't required, and those seem way more serious to me than even the COVID one.
Yeah, not
Wow. It's crazy how you listen to yourself speak, and I don't remember that. It's not like it's stored in my memory, like that conversation. But the amount that all of that holds up still is crazy.
That was a year ago.
That is strong. I completely agree with all of that, and we were right on some things. We knew that the airlines were going to do that. We knew that the segregation was going to end up happening. We knew that other countries all around the world that they were going to do the same thing.
People were going to have bad reactions.
Yeah.
I think the most interesting thing is that you saw from the research on the Great Reset, which was separate before we like even figured out all that vaccine stuff, but you saw that, okay, the world, the WHO is requiring the vaccine and be pushing these countries to go towards that because they want to merge us with eventually machines and technology and combine biology with technology.
That's the transhumanism movement. I think that we're gonna that word specifically, just making note right now, if we ever do another one of these, is gonna be much more prevalent in coming months, because I think, like, if you picked up on how everyone talking about internet being a utility, phones being a utility, more tech, outlets being utilities, that entire conversation has increased recently. I wonder if the reason why is because eventually maybe the federal government will be tied to this. They're going to just they already have such a plethora of metals and materials to be making tech devices and also the full devices, that they're just going to be giving them out like candy. And I think that it will be in their benefit. We might not be able to see what their benefit is right now, but I think in the long term, they want us to have access to tech so that they can more easily implement propaganda and the social credit scoring methodologies that they want to. Which is scary, because I love tech. I don't want to see it being used for evil, and I don't want it to be used for, corrupt transhumanism type of things. But I feel like that's the road that we're heading down right now. Yeah,
that's something that Elon Musk has talked about a lot, and especially if you listen to his most recent interview on the Babylon Bee, he talks about the need for AI regulation. because he says that the demise of humans will be when AI becomes smarter and faster than the human brain, and that actually gets executed into
like
a
already
human.
is.
Yeah, and he said it already is, but if it's in a human and that's happening, then like there's going to be a direct conflict because our brain is going to be moving slower, like our movements are slower than an actual computer. And I think that actually what the problem is that China does not have a lot of regulations when it comes to human rights, experimentation. I mean, we did
More like none at all.
we did our gain of function research in China. That's what most likely started the pandemic. And something that I didn't realize, and I think it actually came together when I was watching. It was actually a recommendation from one of our listeners to watch the Alex Jones documentary from 2007, I think, or 2009. And he talks a lot about how the purpose of China and why the Western world, specifically the U.S., lets China get away with murder when it comes to human rights, when it comes to corrupt capitalism, which is ultimately a pseudo-fascist capitalism, is because we want to see how it plays out first elsewhere, see what works, and then implement it here. And a lot of people, even Elon Musk says, well, like even if we regulated AI, we would eventually have to compete with China. Even if we regulated our weapons, we'd eventually have to compete with China. Think about the atomic bomb. We have to keep creating those weapons so that we can be at the same level as Russia, other countries, right? And
so if they don't regulate AI, if they don't regulate these things that we're for regulating and end up regulating, then we're not going to be able to compete or be in the same playing field as them with their technology that they've allowed to be unleashed.
And then you take it the next step further and you go, okay, well then why haven't we intervened? Why didn't we intervene earlier? We knew China was doing this stuff. It's because we want to have a reason to have to not regulate here. And people even say that we were behind the one-child policy in China because we wanted to see if it'd be an effective I mean, this is going to sound conspiratorial, but it's true. Like, there are people that think that we wanted to see how a policy like that could potentially transpire in even Western countries and end up being a disaster.
I would assume that it was a small collective of people, though, who thought that.
It was high up people. It was the Bush administration, stuff like that. And so on the front, you think, oh, I might be voting for a pro-life candidate or what this is. Someone's going to like defend human rights, all this stuff. But in the background, China has always been the Western world's kind of experimental country. And I mean, you even see that with COVID. The lab that was in China, the Wuhan lab, we funded that. That was US dollars. That was funding the gain of function research. We indirectly or directly caused a pandemic. So I mean, you can only put so much blame on China. Like, we're creating our own, like, we're feeding the beast.
Yeah.
And if you think about
but you'll see in the mainstream media, though, us pinning ourselves or us pinning China against us, that we're separate from China, that's China and we're us. And it's that dichotomy, that clear dichotomy. But actually, it's not at all. We're so much more meshed than people think. And you don't see that in the mainstream media, which is why it's hard to wrap your head around. But that is the truth. Even ask Dr. Fauci. We need to hold him accountable.
Yeah.
Lied to Congress about that. But yeah, totally tied to China.
Yeah.
It's not even, it's not even a question.
And then what do? They distract us with fake wars. They make us focus on the Middle East, Iran, Afghanistan, Iraq. And okay, yes, these countries hate us, okay? But I'm sorry, they never had weapons of mass destruction. If we really wanted to go in, infiltrate, try to spread democracy, we should have done that to China. And we didn't even have to go into China. We just had to be like, fine, we won't do business with you. We won't allow our companies to go in and do manufacturing with China. Do you know when a U.S. company, and Joe Rogan talks about this on his podcast, when a U.S. company goes into China and sets up a location there, shop there, whatever, they're then, if they take on a partnership with the Chinese, their whole company can be slowly infiltrated by that way. And then suddenly you have to start making deals with the devil. And we didn't even
when you didn't even sign up for it in the first place.
And we didn't even have to go to war with China. We just had to be like, okay, we'll do a trade war. Like, we didn't even have to kill anyone. And we won't do that. And we won't hold them accountable at the Paris Climate Accord. They get till 2030 to lower emissions. So clearly we're letting them have a free pass for some reason or another.
The 2030 year too. Why that?
I don't know.
You know, that doesn't make, it's kind of weirdly coincidental with the 2030 agenda, and why that year, I'm not sure.
Yeah, so I think that we come up with these distractions in other countries that actually might not be that much of a threat in the grand scheme of things, and then we don't pay attention to, I mean, even like the Uyghur massacre that's happening. We don't even publicly call that out. And we supposedly fought World War II to help free the Jewish people. Like, it doesn't make sense. So I don't know. I have a lot of questions there. And I think that we're also in a mass psychosis, which also ties into like the destabilization. Did you watch that mass psychosis video that I sent you? Yeah.
I think that, I guess the term mass psychosis could explain it. I mean, I'm not a psychologist. I feel like most people are familiar with what a psychosis could be. I just think that we're all so disconnected from reality in so many ways. And I don't think that there's blame on one sole entity or reason. I think tech has pushed that in a bad direction, unfortunately, just us being so much more immersed in the digital space that we forget about, you know, the freedoms and things we love in the real world. But yeah, I mean, if you're saying you think we're in a mass psychosis, I guess, yeah, in a way I agree too.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about, I don't know. I think that too, the metaverse is
just going to be another means to keep people occupied and keep our brains occupied, to take us out of reality, to distract us from reality, to distract us from all of the horrors that are going to be incrementally increasing throughout this time before the metaverse even comes out. Like, it's we're already underway.
In a metaverse.
You're right. We are. Social media is kind of like its own metaverse in itself. It's just on different platforms.
How many hours do you spend on your device a day, including your work?
Most people, I would assume, all day long.
Yeah. So it's like, okay, maybe you don't have a VR set on, but are you looking at a screen all day? Are you immersed in what, like, yeah.
Yeah.
So you might already.
The transition is not going to be hard at all. It's actually going to be easier, and people will prefer it.
And it might not even be that obvious. Like, maybe they're trying to make it look obvious now so that we don't even realize that we're already in a metaverse of a sense.
Yeah. I was learning a little bit about Web 3.0, which I guess the metaverse is going to be categorized in. Right now, we're currently in Web 2.0, which is like Web 0.0 was when we created the internet, and we basically used it as an online library of just looking up Wikipedia and finding information. Like, we got the information from the internet. Web 2.0 was, okay, yes, we have that and all that access to information, but we're also the information. So that's Web 2.0 is when all of these services, these companies and sites started using us for data mining, taking our data and then turning that into, you know, really catered advertising that then they can capitalize on and make money from. Web 3.0 is going to be all of that, but maximize so much more with the combination of NFTs, with the combination of crypto, with the combination of
digital real estate.
more of these highly complex metaverse type platforms that involve gaming, like just everything digital, just on steroids. So I'm going to be really interested and keenly looking into what's going to be happening. Obviously, yeah, I'm a fan of what we can use tech for, but like I've said in previous episodes, I try to weave it in every episode. I'm just terrified to see what like evil is done with it. And that's going to happen. Like it's just completely inevitable.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, going back really quickly to the mass psychosis thing, I think a really just really good example of people being in that is seeing different people react to the Australia concentration camps on Instagram and Twitter. And it's actually something that I think is kind of funny, but this is actually it's not funny because I feel bad for the people there, but this has been one of the weirdest things that I've seen. There's literally and this kind of ties into like the technology stuff and Web 2.0, but there's a marketing campaign of influencers that get sent to these quarantine camps alongside regular people, and they do full on Instagram shoots, and they're like beautiful, they're like skinny, they're in shape, they're not wearing their mask, they're like, oh my gosh, like this is a vacation, I'm eating healthy,
to make it look glamorous and appetizing and awesome.
And then you see like the actual photos that get leaked, and you see people in masks in like lab coats with police in like a gate, and the food looks nasty, and it looks like a concentration
So it's like
camp.
Coachella versus Fire Festival.
Yes. No, literally, that's what it looks
the
like.
reality versus the pseudo reality that they're trying to propagandize using these fake Instagram models and influencers that are posting photos from their accounts as if they're actually there and loving it.
Yeah, and something that wasn't a like fake account, but it actually was this this artist that I follow in LA, and I think a lot of people would be familiar with her work. I forget her name, but she does a lot of she did a whole like film series with captions, but it was all just like still images, and it told like a story over multiple weeks. But she went to Australia to visit family recently, and I guess you get assigned either a camp or a hotel. And she was explaining that she was even assigned like one of the nicer hotels, like the luxury place. Like she had a view, she had a good, like, because it's just you randomly assigned it, but she lucked out. And she was posting on her story, even though she's in a luxury place for 14 days, not having fresh air, being alone, she was going crazy.
Wow.
And she was in one of the nice spots.
I believe it. Yeah.
So I'm
because
like,
at the end of the day, it's confining. You're not making decisions. It just goes against that nature of freedom, which I don't know what it is about us, but we want that.
Yeah.
Anything that feels forced, that you're forced into, will automatically create a detestful tone within ourselves that we don't like it. We don't want it.
Yeah, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know.
I can't imagine that. I hope I never have to go through that. I hope the U.S. does not continue adopting these camps and establishing these camps, because I don't know what the word for like de-evolution is, but it's just sending us back to where we were centuries ago, decades ago. And I don't want to see us get there. Like, we are too evolved. We have too many things, too many beauties, and we're too smart at this point to allow that to happen. So I need people to wake up. Here's where we're finally dropping, I guess, the title of this episode. It's called The Great Resist. It's a response to the Great Reset. The Great Reset is happening. It is not by the feds. It is by big corporations, elite, and powerful people infiltrating on the powerless, which is people like us. And even though we are autonomous, we are powerless to them. Mm-hmm. So I guess it goes back to, our favorite franchises and quotes we've heard in a million movies and trilogies and books. But power resides where men allows power to reside. So we need to stop giving them that and resist where we can. Obviously, we're not going to be able to every single second of the day. It's hard. We've got jobs, we've got families, we've got responsibilities to ourselves, our people around us. But I think we should all be at least agreeing on recognizing what's going on right now. So I think that's what we're here doing this episode for.
Yeah. So there's a tweet that I want to bring up before we get into I think this will kind of get us into predictions and stuff, but so there was a tweet that said, like, we talked about a few of this stuff, but CDC reduces quarantine to 5 days, which we don't think we talked about that yet, but that was something that was announced, I think, yesterday. But it's actually come out that Delta Airlines sent a request to the CDC to do this because having it
benefits them and
having
making more money with people flying more often and
not having employees out for twice as long sick or whatever.
Yeah.
And then Biden said there's no federal solution, which we talked about that and why that was suspicious. Then we had the CBS Face of the Nation discusses the devastating impacts of COVID policies on children. I don't think that we had seen like a major.
Oh, that's a great clip. We'll attach that in the description of this. But yeah, basically this entire roundtable of CBS broadcasters were having like a very earnest discussion. Like you don't really see typical broadcast media people bring like a level of empathy and sort of somber tone to when they're doing announcements and news coverage. But in this particular clip, like they were all very like just showing the emotion behind it. Like we're so sad for the children and whatever. And I'm sitting there watching going, you allowed this to happen. You told parents to be terrified for 2 years. You told parents to be fine with allowing your kid to be on some
Zoom.
$200, Acer computer with all these glitches every 20 minutes trying to do online learning. You told people that making those sacrifices was worth it in the long run. And then you decide within a 24-hour decision alongside all these other weird, coincidences that are going on at the same time.
After you called other people that's been saying that for 2 years conspiracy theorists.
Exactly. It frustrates me so much because these kids, and I've said this from the beginning, anything that has involved us, suppressing the upbringing that kids should be having has hit me so much harder than so many other things because we're adults. We're able to see through with the skepticism and the lens of a more mature brain than kids are. Kids are reliant on us. There's a reason for that because they're not fully developed. And so they've been just so subject to all of these measures and they've lost 2 years and it's going to be more if we don't put an end to this.
Yeah.
So I am glad that they're, I guess, in a way now starting to reverse their stances on this stuff. But I just know that there's something else behind it, and it's probably not alluding to something good. So we need to look out for that.
Remember the drawing that kid did with the people, and she drew masks over?
Yeah, she's like, Mommy, what? It doesn't have a mask on their face. Like, that's not a person. And that's so raw and real. Like, and they have no bad intentions drawing that, but that's just the world that they've been seeing. They're drawing sketches on printed pieces of paper of human beings with masks on them because that's what they view their reality as now. Yeah. It's just crazy.
Yeah. It's horrible.
Okay, go back to the tweet.
It's okay.
Sorry.
There's 2 more things. New York Times admits that the vaccine passes don't increase uptake. So they're basically meaning that vax passes don't work. And then this isn't on the list, but I want to add this because the CDC director just came out and said that cloth masks do not work. And the tweet ends with promising but suspicious they're up to something, which Jordan already alluded to. I think it's great to see this on surface value, but after it's like a cheating boyfriend who robbed everything from you. Like at some point, even if they came around and said, "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I was wrong. Like, I'm so sorry that I misled you for 2 years." I'm like, okay, what's
like
going
a
on?
2-second apology or like all of the 2 years that you dealt with like actual suffering.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's covering their bases, but it doesn't reverse anything. And for them to all be having these coincidental epiphanies at the same time, like we're talking within the last 2 days since Christmas. So it's only been a couple days this week. So I don't know. That just seems like such a short amount of time for all of these massive companies, including the president of the United States and the Biden administration, to be all on the same page.
Yeah. To go from the winner of the unvaccinated, and we wish you a Christmas of death, to there is no federal solution. This should be left out to the states.
And then Biden's like, peace, I'm going to go on my helicopter to Delaware, and who knows when we'll see him again.
Like, I just have a lot of questions. And I don't, like, some people are saying, oh, this is just, they know that they can't win the 2022 election. I'm like,
no, they're not conceding.
There's something
They're
else.
not conceding.
Like, they can't be conceding. Like, they're too deep into this, which is why I point back to the police state theory. I think that's my strongest theory right now. But ultimately, I don't know. Like, I don't know what's going to happen. I don't
either. I don't either. I don't really have any predictions for what that will ensue, but all I know is I'm going to be just, keeping my eyes peeled to see if any more companies like the World Economic Forum, the CDC, the WHO, whoever else, these big globalist companies are going to be publishing and announcing in, the next coming weeks. But we'll see.
Do you think that the next thing will be the cyber threat, and that will maybe force people to merge with, because they need
they want us to all be in the metaverse.
Yeah, they want us to,
because then they can
be with AI. They want us to merge with AI. So how do they do that? If they can't do it, if they fail on the vaccine front and getting us to take, I think maybe eventually be the COVID pill. I don't know. But if they fail on that, getting control of our DNA that way, do you think it'll be the cyber threat attack?
I think that's going to happen no matter what.
Okay.
I think a cyber attack, like a real blackout, now that everybody's working from home and everybody does all of their business, via some sort of device of some sort. And already a lot of businesses have implemented some sort of like automation software that runs their businesses. Like a lot of manufacturing factories have these. I'm not exactly sure what the type of software name the technology is named, but there are a lot of companies that have very routine like activities on a day-to-day basis that can actually just be totally run by an AI or by like a blockchain technology of sorts. So there's a lot of companies that already do that. So if there was a cyber blackout, like the entire grid, the entire internet shuts down, the amount of businesses that would not be able to conduct their activities would be a ton.
Yeah.
And the amount of people that would lose a lot of money and a lot of income from having their work from home businesses being shut down would be detrimental too. So, but there's a side of me that thinks that they aren't going to do that cyber attack, blackout, pandemic thing, whatever you want to call it, until we're more immersed. Okay. And I think that is going to be much more aligned with the metaverse when that really hits the ground running, because I think from what I've been able to gather from Zuckerberg's announcements and Meta, formerly Facebook's announcements, I think that they're on a pretty fast track to get their entire platform launched. And then I keep seeing a million Oculus commercials. I saw a ton before Christmas. They're probably making more and more of those VR headsets. So we'll see. Yeah. But yeah, definitely be on the lookout for any aliases under cyber attack or blackout or cyber pandemic, anything of that sort too.
Or that they're doing like a prep for it, because remember, Event 201 was the precursor to COVID, which was funded by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and John Hopkins.
It was labeled the simulation for a potential pandemic. And this was done about a year before. No, I think it was only a couple months.
It was only a couple months.
I think it was like the November of 2019, just a couple months before COVID-19 happened.
And right now they've done a few of this regarded to cyber. I mean, right here on Reuter Business, I have Israel led a 10-country stimulation of a major cyber attack on the global financial system in an attempt to increase cooperation that could minimize any potential damage to financial markets and banks. So,
wow.
Yeah, not included the U.S. So I don't know.
Okay, well, I guess that kind of
same pattern.
That kind of segues into our predictions. Maybe if we have some more predictions. I know we have a few written down, but So what, we think there's going to be more protests against vaccine mandates?
Yeah, and I think that this kind of ties into the hope and resistance part of the episode, which was kind of the last thing that we wanted to do. But I think that there's going to continue to be more protests. I think that they're going to continue to grow. I'm hoping that they grow more in the U.S. It seems that the U.S. has been a little bit more complicit than Europe has. And I think that that's because it happened a lot slower here. And like you can still eat outside. Like it hasn't been as intense as Europe. I think when things are slow, people don't recognize it as much. And I think that when we were doing our predictions, we thought it was going to be a little bit more aggressive here, and not that it hasn't with like the jobs and stuff. But I think that having like the legal, like I think that also it helps that we've had these lawsuits to go through. We have the Supreme Court hearing against the mandates, specifically the 100 employees or more. So I think that that's going to be huge. I'm hoping that that goes in the right direction. So yeah, I think that there's going to be more protests hopefully too. So we'll see.
I hope so. I think that that's a very, boots to the ground way of fighting against something without risking the possibility of being censored online, without trying to spread information online that can get tampered with or hacked. Because we've seen that before. You can see a protest video of a vaccine mandate protest and, see Instagram's alerts that they put on it. I forget what those are called, but they like flag a lot of that type of stuff, which is obviously raw footage from real protests that are happening and real people that are out there trying to fight for freedom. So, I think that in-person, on the ground way of doing it is good, and it is ethical, and it's in our Constitution for a reason.
Yeah, and I would encourage anyone who has the opportunity to attend one of these protests. I had the opportunity to do that in November in New York, and I think just being able to be a part of something that ultimately will be historic, hopefully history judges it well. I think that it will, assuming that the right people come up on top. And I think that recently, I don't know, you see these other protests like the pro-choice protests or like
LGBTQ.
Yeah, like I mean, I think that there hasn't been like a real like human rights all encompassing, everyone's involved. This literally could affect anyone, all races, all genders, all ethnicities, all sexual orientation, all ages. I mean, it's affecting people as young as 5. And to have that energy all in one space for everyone to be united on one pro-human cause is really beautiful. And I think that if you can be a part of that in your generation and be able to tell your grandkids that, I think that's really powerful. So I'd encourage everyone to do that. I think that I think that the people that have drawn their line in the sand at the vaccine mandates, and then anything that merges us with AI, anything that divides people, I think that those people that have drawn that line in the sand are going to continue to feel a little bit more isolated from the general public. I think that I didn't predict that strongly enough in the other episode. I didn't think I realized how isolating that feeling would be, and that definitely has happened this year.
Yeah. More things that I guess we can be resisting, just anything regarding a social credit score, giving our information to banks, giving up our assets. I don't want to see that. Even when something might seem tempting, like, making more money owning Airbnbs and renting them out, or making more money renting out whatever service that is, but not actually like allowing people to own it. I think anything of that sort is kind of a red flag, because it can be taken over by people higher up and that have more devious agendas than you may think. So I think that we should resist that. And then also anything big pharma related with COVID pills,
potentially COVID daily prescriptions that we take, your morning shot, or maybe it'll be a chip at some point. We don't know. That's just implanted.
Yeah.
So anything like that, it's just so unnecessary.
Just say no.
We try to remain pretty spiritually neutral when we record these episodes, but I will say God made our bodies this advanced for a reason. Our bodies are so capable, and the fact that we have survived for this long through famine, Black Plague, like so many things, traveling on a sea in a boat with people throwing up on each other, like the fact that our bodies have survived that and transcended that to make us who we are, it's just a testament to that we do not need all of this stuff all the time. It is it's bullshit. It's it's bullshit. So
it's money making.
Resist
propaganda.
that. Exactly.
Yes. Also, I want to give a shout out to Joe Rogan. He's been a huge asset this year. He went from almost taking the vaccine. The only reason why he didn't was because they ended up not distributing it at the UFC arena or wherever. And now he's been one of the leading forces for freedom on that front. He canceled his Vancouver show because they were requiring a vaccine passport. He's had many doctors on his podcast recently. Mm-hmm. You just finished one of the episodes.
Yep, with Dr. Peter McCullough. It was awesome. Very tangible too, concise, well-spoken.
Not conspiracy.
Not at all.
Yeah.
I mean, you're listening to someone who speaks on what they do for a living every single day and has very in-person observations, like upfront data, access to data. So it's as legit as it gets.
I want to give a shout out to Tim Dillon for
for being a light at the end of the tunnel,
for being a source of laughter during this dark time, for introducing me to asking questions about things that I did not see as issues before, making me see America in a different light. And by America, I mean like the government, not America as like a idea and a beautiful country and a beautiful soul and constitution, but as like a government ruling entity.
And just all of his antics on day-to-day little things too, and on the social media pop culture world. He's really up on so many categories of society, and it's impressive to me.
It shows. I know you listen to other people that are like famous, like you listen to like the Tonight Shows and stuff, and it's like listening to a baby boomer.
Oh my gosh, can we? Okay,
I want to baby boom. Yeah.
Can we just talk about this for a second?
Yes.
I'll make it brief, but I've been having a series of more epiphanies about the baby boomer generation and how frustrated I am.
Also, shout out to Tim Dillon because he talks about that a lot.
He does. Mm-hmm. Okay, well, yeah, the baby boomers, granted, they are the ones that are running all these companies because they're all 70, 80 years old.
And they're running the government.
I mean, Pelosi's 81, Biden's 79, 80. Fauci's 81. Pretty much everybody that is like a real power, money moving person is late 70s, early 80s. They're so old and they're so rich, and they never understood the suffering that their ancestors and older generations prior to them had to endure in order for them to have an easier upbringing. So they've just gone all of these decades since the 40s being so entitled, having things a lot more spoon-fed than previous generations, and I think have kind of taken things too far and are now sacrificing the comfort and success of our younger generations than them
for their comfort,
for their own benefit and convenience, which is really, really creepy and messed up. I don't like it.
Yeah, I don't like that. It's almost like when we started this whole COVID thing that we knew that was like a weakness in American culture, because the whole pitch was mask your kids, make your kids be online school, don't have a social life, be depressed, be anxious, more suicides for young people, less economic benefits. Now you're worse off economically than the previous generations. It's like the first time that this has happened. And why? The pitch was, we sacrifice for the old people. When has that ever been the case? It's always been the older generation sacrifices for the next generation.
Because typically when you're an older person, you look at younger people and you say, hey,
they have so much life
I've
ahead
made
of
my
them.
money. I'm retired. I don't have anything really else more going for me. Like me and my husband, or maybe that you're already widowed. Like that's just the cycle of life. There isn't as much going on for you. Granted, you can still, play your part in society, help the poor, do philanthropic
You still have
work.
much human value, but
Your dignity is 100% still there in the exact same way. But it's just concerning that it's the complete opposite now.
it's as easy as
They don't care.
No.
They're saying, no, you have to sacrifice your immune system health for me,
Yeah.
even though you're 80 years younger than me.
Yeah. Or
That's really odd.
Or I would rather travel to New York and give in to the vaccine stuff because I would like to go on a trip, as opposed to like, oh, wait, if I give into this means that I could give up freedom after I die to my grandkids, and they might want that to happen, like it's so frustrating. And I think that it also shows how spiritually poor we are as a country, because if people were more in touch with their spirituality and had a better understanding of death and encountered death more often. I mean, if you think about the baby boomer generation, this is the generation that has seen the least amount of death in their lifetime. And I'm generalizing here, but that's because they lived in a period where modern medicine really advanced and they were the beneficiaries of that. But what happens now? Okay, their quality of life is so horrible because they just are trying to live forever, and their whole life is just doctor's appointments for the most part, just to keep them alive and breathing. And it's not a high quality of life, but they'd rather have that than just to let go, be natural, and let death just take them, because no one's really,
they haven't processed the presence of death.
Yeah, and
as a collective
and getting
generation.
ready for the next life potentially, and what is eternal life? Is there eternal life? Like we need to grapple with those questions. That's more important, honestly, than the physical stuff. The spiritual stuff, I think, takes precedent. And if you don't work through that is the most important thing to you, reaching that goal, then you are going to get caught up in the physical world, and you're going to
obsess over delaying the death process as best as you can. Yeah, you're right. That's the problem. It's that they're not in tune with the realities of their existence and what comes next, and are in a spiritual I guess you could say
battle,
deprivation, spiritual deprivation. So it's kind of sad.
No, it's really sad.
And they're willing to throw us up as shields, the young people as shields. Like, screw you. Like you help us to help prolong our life cycle.
And I think too, I mean, there's also this financial struggle. I mean, they were the beneficiaries of the gold standard. They were the beneficiaries of being able to, if you look at, it's also like, maybe we shouldn't be living this long to hold on to all these assets and just like keep acquiring all this stuff. And like you said, they haven't even seen a world where things haven't been free. So they can't even wrap their heads that this could all go away. Yeah. They've seen 80 years.
They don't think it's possible.
Yeah, they've seen 80 years of complete autonomy, complete liberty. I mean, and it honestly has fueled selfishness. If you think about a lot of stuff that's almost like too much freedom, like even if you think about just our mindset on like kids and starting families, like it's been marketed as this like negative thing when it doesn't need to be a negative thing. It's actually supposed to be like the main thing that we do from an evolutionary point of view, is completely to have children. And so
those boomers, they are something. But yeah, I've been realizing a lot more of that recently. And I mean, no shade on my grandparents. I love my grandparents, but yeah, they lived a different young reality than we are in right now. And hate to say it, but I think we're going to be entering a phase of more firsthand suffering than they ever had.
Yeah, it's a war, period.
Yeah.
And it happens. What's the cycle of men? It's like that diagram of men, like bad times make strong men and weak times make weak men, or good times make weak men, and the cycle continues.
I know what you're talking about, but I don't know it off the top of my head, but
yeah. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that
it's a very multidimensional topic. I think we did make some predictions. Obviously nothing too concrete.
Hillary Clinton 2024.
Okay. We need to not talk about that. I just don't even want to say her name anymore. Like, just go live on an island, Hillary.
Go to Jeffrey Epstein's island.
Like, the Clintons just need to, like, they're as deep state as it gets. Why does she have a master class now? Is she qualified to have a master class? I don't understand
the Bushes, Clinton.
Like, I don't want to learn about the tactics of warfare from George Bush. Like, he's the reason why we're facing so many issues now.
You don't want to learn how to be a war criminal?
No, I don't. And I certainly don't want to learn how to be a failed president from Hillary Clinton. Like, that's just completely inappropriate. So I don't know.
I think that's a good thing to end on.
I don't know what the ratings on that one's going to be, but yeah, it's funny.
The ratings?
Eventually, yeah, at some point.
Oh, I'm so excited.
Like on Rotten Tomatoes or some of those.
Oh gosh, that's not going to be accurate.
Actually, sometimes it is.
Okay.
Because you can see the audience score. Like the tomato score is where like their critics do it, but like the audience score is when people with accounts can go in and review what they think of it. But yeah, I don't plan on watching Hillary Clinton's masterclass.
Okay.
Guys, thank you so much for watching. Just to reiterate our announcements from earlier, we have a Kickstarter campaign launching in January. We're tuned. Super excited for that. We'll be posting much more routinely going, in the next couple weeks and months. And what else? Oh, we've got a newsletter now. We're going to be sending out another social media announcement, trying to collect some.
We're officially a business and registered with the IRS.
Yeah, let's go. We're an LLC, guys.
Yes, so that's exciting. As always, like, subscribe, please comment, give us your feedback. Go back and watch our other episode if you have time. I think it was episode 25?
Yeah, I think so. It was from December of 2020, and hopefully maybe next year we'll do another one of these.
Yeah.
And
if we're not already
if we're not off in the trees hiding from drones shooting us down from the police state.
Yes.
Hopefully that won't happen. Cross our fingers. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.